All right, hello, my friends. If you can't already tell, it's actually pretty chilly down here in South Texas. And at this point, those of you familiar with this channel, you already know what we're going to be talking about. We, today, in this chilly South Texan day, are going to be talking all about the history of the Camaro. So let's do it. To paint a picture of the times, okay? And by that I mean I'm going to paint a picture of 2.5 years prior, right? Yes, I got that right. It's 1964 and a half, and the Ford Mustang has just made its grand debut. It's selling like hotcakes, all right? They planned the Mustang especially well to target. Oh, look, I just noticed. You can see the Murcielago peeping out the back there. Okay, sorry. Distractions galore. Anyways, Ford had targeted the baby boomers that had just come of driving age, all right? And naturally, Chevy was not going to let the entire pony car market go to Ford. So when the Mustang hit the market, well, Chevy went right to work to create the Camaro. Now, before I get too far along into the history of the Camaro, I do want to say a big thank you for the owner, Solomon P. Ortiz Jr., one of our family friends, for letting me make a video on his first generation Camaro. All right, now it is absolutely necessary for us to talk about how Chevy started hyping up the codename project, because it wasn't the Camaro yet, it was the codename project Panther. And they started hyping it up in 1965. And frankly, the antics that they used in their press and marketing departments were just a little crazy. And that's why we're going to talk about them. Now, like I mentioned, they started hyping the Panther project in 1965. So before the Camaro was a Camaro, it was codenamed the Panther. Let's talk about the first part of their loony antics, okay? It's June of 1966, and 200 automotive journalists, professional journalists, get this bizarre telegram stating, "We cordially," and this is me trying to remember it exactly so it's not word for word, all right? "We cordially invite you June 28th, 1966, to the first SEPAW meeting. We hope you will be on hand to help scratch a cat. Signed, John L. Cutter, Chevy Public Relations." And at this point, y'all, just like the journalists, are probably wondering, well, what is SEPAW? What is SEPAW? And yes, they were wondering that. What the heck? Until the very next day, they received a second telegram stating, "Society for the Eradication of Panthers in the Automotive World will have its first and last meeting on June the 28th, signed, John L. Cutter, Public Relations of Chevy." None of it makes sense. So at this point, there's like 200 journalists that 100% think that the Chevy PR department has lost their mind. All right, now finally, this enigma of a press conference finally rolls around. And it's actually pretty cutting edge for the times. They did a 14-city teleconference. Yeah, I know we live in the world of Zoom right now, but that had never been done before. Now, let's get to the juice of this 14-city teleconference, right? At this teleconference, General Manager Pete Estes says, "This is the first and last meeting of SEPAW, right? The Society for the Eradication of Panthers in the Automotive World, all right? And all of the journalists in attendance are charter members." I bet they thought that they were losing their minds. And finally, he gets around to the juice of it. He explains that they are announcing a new car line, the Camaro. So really, in a very roundabout way, they were announcing the Camaro and also applying its real name and getting rid of its project name, the Panther. We really ought to talk about where the word Camaro originated. Now, Camaro is not an actual word. I'm just gonna say this, all right? It is not an actual word, even though Chevy tried to act like it was. Chevy, Pete Estes said that the Camaro represents the comradeship between friends, just as a car should be for its owner. Now, I may have not said that word for word, but you get the gist. And now, like I said, GM execs did try and pull off like it was a real word. They said that they found it in a French book. There's no French word, Camaro, but where they probably got it was camarade, which I'm not pronounced. I took German and I took Spanish. I didn't take French in high school or college. That is where the English word comrade is derived from. So they kind of played around with it, and that's what they got. They got the Camaro. So, okay, the press are like, all right, we got a new car coming up, but what is the Camaro? To which Chevy said, the Camaro is a small, vicious animal that eats Mustangs. Now, if those ain't fighting words, I don't know what is, all right? Now, I'm sure Ford and Lee Iacocca and the Deuce and all them were like, you know, they were getting wind of the press antics and just probably getting a good chuckle. I would say so. All right, now let's talk about the first generation Camaro, produced from 1967 to 1969 on the General Motors F-body platform with either the base inline 6 or V8 options. If one wanted high performance, they could choose from the Super Sport, Rally Sport, or the Z28. So, you know what's kind of neat? Well, the Z28 in the first generation Camaro literature, sales literature, was not listed. It was kind of like a secret menu option. Now, before I forget, all right, before we start talking about the second, third, fifth, and sixth generations of the Camaro, let's go ahead and take a little look around the car. In 1970, we would see the introduction of the second generation Camaro, produced till 1981. Still based on that F-body platform, but just a few years into the introduction of the second generation, we would see a heavy restyle. The Camaro grew longer, lower, and wider with the second generation. With the second generation, engine options included a V6, straight 6, and a V8. So, interesting thing to note is that during the second generation, you would not see a convertible. And now really, that was just a sign of the times. You see, things were changing in the early 70s. You had the US with new safety regulations, new environmental regulations. Really, the landscape of automotives were changing significantly. And with certain safety regulations, there were a lot of automotive manufacturers that thought that your typical convertible was never going to be seen again. And that's also, side note, digressing to a different automotive manufacturer, that's where Porsche decided to create their Targa top. That was a little digression, but I think it's pretty interesting. Now also, with the second generation, GM called that second generation Camaro more of a driver's car. Which, what the heck does that mean for the first generation? So also, just to note, that is not the first time that Chevy kind of bit themselves in the rear end with a new slogan for a car, all right? I did a video on a 1938 Chevy Master Deluxe, and its slogan was, a car that is complete, which kind of inferred that their other cars had not been complete prior. All right, it is 1982, and we are seeing the third generation come onto the scene, and it would be produced till 1992. These were the first generation of Camaros to offer fuel injection, turbo hydromatic, 700 R4 4-speed automatic transmissions, and a 5-speed manual. The third generation Camaros were nearly 500 pounds lighter than the previous generation. And since I just talked about convertibles for so long, we would finally see the reintroduction of a convertible Camaro in 1987. All right, and then in 1993, we would see the fourth generation come onto the scene, produced until 2002. It debuted on a updated F-body platform. It had anti-lock brakes, standard, with options of a V6 or V8. Well, some of you may know where I'm about to go with this. The fourth generation saw suffering sales and a dwindling sports car market. And it was with this generation in 2002 that Chevy decided to discontinue the production of the Camaro. But have no fear. Thank goodness back in 2010, we would see the reintroduction of the Camaro with that aggressive retro nod to styling, all right? That they weren't the only ones that were doing it. Dodge did it. That's when finally the Mustang got back to being masculine and not a little jelly bean, okay? So they went and they got their ducks in order. They came out in 2010 with the fifth generation Camaro. Camaro was back with complete redesign and an all new platform. Now in 2016, we would have our sixth generation. The sixth gen has over 70% of purely unique to itself architectural components that are not shared with other GM vehicles. So I feel the need to point out that that is a little bit rare, all right? It's very prevalent and very normal practice if you're trying to save money to just kind of have, a very large parts bin that a lot of your cars dip from, if you're an automotive manufacturer. And in 2016, the sixth generation Camaro won Car of the Year from Motor Trend. So, something I was thinking about, there were a few cars that Chevy played catch up to with Ford, right? All right, you had the Mustang, you had the Camaro. You had the Ranchero, followed with the El Camino, right? You had the Falcon, followed with the Nova. Other than the Corvette, can we think of a time when Chevy hit or bloomed or created a market for a car ahead of anyone else? They were the first American sports car with a Corvette in 1953. So that kind of blows a lot of it out of the water. Was the Corvette a bust the first few years? Yes, that's okay. They got around to being the mean machine it is today, all right? But yeah, that's interesting to think about. Now, you tell me, what is your favorite Camaro generation, huh? There's no wrong answers. Well, there might be. It might be the fourth generation. I'm kidding. Now, if you aren't familiar with this channel, welcome, all right? If classic cars and car history is your cup of tea, then go ahead and press the subscribe button and the like button. Why not, if you're already there? Should I make a video on the Murcielago right behind me, huh? I probably should. All right, guys, at this point, it's time to say goodbye. Bye!